White supremacists have always been drawn to classical studies out of a desire to affirm.
I'll do you one worse. White supremacists developed classical studies. Okay, so first off, go watch Keyes' videos on the painted statues. It's a really, really important thing that a lot of people tend to ignore when thinking about art from the classical period. And their videos just generally very good and informative. But unfortunately for Keyes and the rest of the internet, that video triggered something in my brain that makes me want to put my classic student hat back on. So let's talk about it. So, for those of you that don't know, I'm a double major at my university. I major in archaeology and classical studies. And part of the degree requirements for the classical studies program is that we take a course that's basically the history of classics, how the field was developed, how the field looks now. And we spend basically the back half of the semester discussing whether or not classical studies as it exists now should even be a field. So, brief history. The field of classical studies was essentially founded by a bunch of very, very wealthy people in the 18th century, going out and basically as a sort of like coming of age, they would go out and do these tours along the Mediterranean and just like pick up artifacts and take that stuff home to show it off. And it would develop into people, still very, very wealthy people from the West, using texts like the Iliad or the Odyssey as a way to inform where they search for specific items. This is why you'll see, especially in like Bronze Age Aegean studies, a lot of stuff is named after figures from epic poetry, like the Mask of Agamemnon and stuff like that. And so it started as a form of colonialism, like no holds bar, straight up. Like that's why the field exists. However, of course, as our society develops and tries to become more holistic and reasonable and inclusive, the field has had some shifts over time. However, it still very, very, very much has a racism, classism, and what have you problem. So at least where I go to school, a classics degree is basically defined as a specific degree that teaches you how to think in specific ways through the lens of ancient Greece and ancient Rome. And ancient Greece and ancient Rome are kind of used as these, like, I don't want to say pedestals, but that's the best word that comes to mind at the moment. But basically, is these pedestals for, like, what higher and more developed thinking should look like. And given the origins of the field itself and the issues with racism in classics that Keyes pointed out, it gets a little hinky really, really quickly, and then it gets a lot hinky. So, in more modern times, there have been big pushes for making classical studies more inclusive. And I remember specifically in my class that I took at my college, we talked about kind of like the differentiation between teaching people how to think about like historic societies and historic societies, politics, storytelling, all of that, as opposed to studying ancient Greece and ancient Rome. And somebody in the class brought up a really, really good point that the classics part of classics, where you're talking about like understanding the basics of different societies across the world, should be done globally with a bunch of different ancient societies. So ancient India, the ancient Near East, ancient Europe, ancient, ancient Native, ancient Americas, stuff like that. And then the study of ancient Greece and ancient Rome should be categorized separately, like almost every single one of their counterparts are. Classical studies is only used to refer to ancient Greece and ancient Rome. But if you're looking at, again, like the ancient Near East or regions in Asia, it's referred to as like Arabian studies or Indian studies or Chinese studies, and it just stays like that, and then you get specific within that. So basically, the entire field of classics has a huge white supremacy problem, which is especially contributed to by those guys in the 18th century. Did I say 18th century? 17th century? 18th century. Basically going around and participating in immense imperialism, and with Greece and Rome being upheld as like these pinnacles of human society and democracy, we see this extension of the Roman and Greek these Roman and Greek histories into the development of countries like the United States, where you notice that a lot of our older government buildings are based in a neoclassical style. There's art of early founding fathers and presidents that is remnant of Greco-Roman sculpture, excuse me. There's like, that buff George Washington statue that people always meme on? That was based on a statue of Zeus. So as we're seeing the development of the United States, and paired with this fixation on the United States trying to legitimize itself by connecting itself visually and thoughtfully with ancient Greece and Rome as it is executing systems of white supremacy, such as enslavement, genocide, so on and so forth, it becomes this like weird, twisted little thing. And again, in more recent years, there have been lots of very, very important efforts to remove white supremacy from classics, but it is very, 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 very deep rooted. And I'm sorry, I just had to make this video because I find this topic very, very fascinating. If you want to read more about this, I really, really recommend any works by Daniel Padilla-Peralta. There was a New York Times article about him that came out in like 2021 that basically discusses an incident that occurred at a classical studies conference where Dr. Padilla-Peralta talks about, the issues with white supremacy in classics, and another person at the panel stands up and basically goes on this like racist tirade against Dr. Padilla-Peralta, who is a Black man. And so, yeah, this is just your friendly neighborhood classics student reminding everyone that classics is rooted in racism and classism. However, it still has value as a field and is still capable of changing, and videos like the one Keys did are really, really important to just kind of getting the public and people that are interested in this stuff in a space where they can better understand classical studies and understand ancient Greece and Rome without condoning the issues with racism and classism that the field traditionally has. That is all.